Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 496. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And we're here to talk about movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. James, I almost missed my cue there.
What's your cue?
Well, I was waiting for, and my name is Zach. And I forgot Zach's not here this week, even though I can't see him.
Sure.
But just I'm so used to that. I waited a beat. Like, oh, no, you got to come in there. So.
Right. Yeah, Zach is, he's not here. He didn't make it this week.
He didn't make it. He's still with us. He just didn't make it this week.
Oh, yeah, he's still with us. We should be very clear. Zach still exists. He just is not here.
Nope.
Right. Got to make sure we make that distinction. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle.
Well, thank you. The same to you.
Feels like it's been forever since we've done this, but it really hasn't. It's only been a week.
Since we did a podcast, or since just you and I did a podcast?
Since we recorded a podcast. I don't know why time has slowed down over the last week, but I think I feel like it has.
We did push it a night.
That's true.
To accommodate Zach, who's now not here anyway.
It was accommodating me too. So I went to Illinois for a cousin's wedding over the weekend. And I was supposed to fly back last night and get back in Orlando like 7:30. And originally I was thinking, 7:30, we normally record 9:30. I'll just find a way to see the movie. No big deal. But then last week I was like, it's going to be really tight. So maybe we just push it to Monday. So I think I made the original suggestion. But it's a good thing we pushed it because I didn't even get on the plane until 10 o'clock last night.
Oh, yeah, that's way too late.
And then I lost an hour, and the airport is actually in Sanford, which is like an hour north of Orlando. So I did not get home last night till 3:30 in the morning. It was not fun, I would say.
And then you immediately watched a movie, right?
I watched a movie on the plane on my cell phone.
Is this a movie you want to talk about, or did they say this for like a last 10 top 10?
This is the movie we're going to talk about today. That's what I watched.
You watched on a cell phone? Oh,
on the plane.
the ideal viewing experience for any movie. Yep.
I mean, Clint Eastwood, he spent 91 years of his life leading up to this film, and I watched it on a cell phone.
I'm sure he's exactly how he intended this film to be consumed.
Yeah, for sure.
On a phone, on a plane at 2 a.m.
in glorious 2-channel audio
with AirPods or Bluetooth, whatever you use.
I use Samsung Beans.
What are beans?
I mean, that's the slang term for them. I don't even know what the real model is or whatever, but they look like little beans and they like go into your ear. Unlike the AirPods, which look like you have little white antennas sticking out, these fit in your ear, and unless you're looking for them, you'd never know somebody's wearing them.
They're not sticking out. They stick down. It's not like you've got two antennas sticking like perpendicular out of your head.
I've seen people walking around where those things are like out like this. Now, maybe they're wearing them wrong.
Yeah, that might be user error.
Could be, but I've seen it. And every time I see it, I think, that looks stupid.
See, I like having a little safety flap I can grab onto because my fear is going to go, if there's nothing, it's going to go into my ear. Then I'll be stuck. So with the AirPod, got a little winglets there.
How far in do they go into your ear? I've never used AirPods, so I don't.
They don't go very far. They just rest in there. But
yeah,
maybe it's just a neuroses of mine in general. I don't want things in my ear.
The beans kind of like sit right in the cradle of the bottom of your ear, and I can jog with them in, and they don't fly out. They're great. I love them.
When I was a band teacher, I had custom-made musician earplugs because, listening to 36th graders honk on a saxophone for 45 minutes is not good for your long-term hearing.
Sure.
And these earplugs like fit into my ear canal. Like I had to have them made. They made a mold of my of my, I don't know, outer ear canal, I guess you want to call it, which is super strange for them to put like the pink foam in there. And then they sent me custom earplugs, and they went in there deep, and all they had was like a little tab you could pull on. And one day that little tab pulled out, but the plug didn't pull out because it'll be a tight fit, right? These weren't just like anything. And I panicked. that was like, it was stuck in there. Like, what am I going to do? Obviously got it out, but.
What'd you get it out with? Like your knife, like a knife, or?
No, I was able. No, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna stick more things in my ear to try and. No, I was able to like kind of just get a grip on it with like the ends of my fingers and pluck it out, but it was not a fun day in the classroom.
Crazy. Cool.
Yeah, housekeeping for us?
We do. We always have housekeeping.
Always.
Just a reminder before we get into our review for the week and our list for the week, there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Cinereelists, REEL with an S on the end, and you can watch the podcast while you listen to it there. You could also support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast, get extra after show audio as well as other Cinereelist swag. Leave us an Apple Podcast review on Apple Podcasts. If you have an iPhone, just kind of scroll down on the Cinereelist page and click leave a review, I think is what it's called. 5 stars only. Leave us a little bit of text and we'll read it on the show. And you can also send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. Send a comment, a question, a list suggestion, a movie suggestion, any of those kinds of things. You can send us via email, just like Logan did. Logan sent us an email. We're going to read it right now. Logan writes, "What up, James, Zach, and Kyle? I was just curious if any of you guys are into Twin Peaks. I just finished the original series and ordered the Criterion of Fire Walk with Me. I can't get enough! ! I don't seem to remember a time where you guys ever talked about it on the podcast, so I was just wondering if you guys have watched the show or the movie or the newest Showtime series, Logan." Well, Logan, I definitely am a fan of Twin Peaks, and I've definitely seen the TV show and the movie, but have not seen the Showtime series from a couple of years ago. How about you, Kyle?
I have not seen any Twin Peaks material.
Really?
Really.
Interesting. Are you interested at all, or that ship has sailed for you?
I think I'm intrigued. I like David Lynch. I like Kyle MacLachlan.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that the show never finished its story.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a couple seasons, right? In the late 80s, early 90s?
Late 80s, and then I think the movie was in the 90s.
Okay. Does the movie... if I was to watch the show and then the movie, would I get a satisfying story arc, or does it just kind of abruptly end?
The movie is a prequel.
Okay. Oh, okay.
But it does link into the show and have some things that give you some resolution on the show, even if it never jumps timelines to the end type of thing. And I would say that the show, while it does, again, I haven't seen the recent Showtime series, so I don't know how much of this actually gets wrapped up in the end. But the show proper in its original run did leave open ends, but the big mystery in season 1 that everybody freaked out about that made the show somewhat of a hit, that gets resolved between the TV show and the movie. So
is that who killed Laura Palmer? Is that
yes.
Okay. That's not a spoiler, right? That's the setup.
That's the setup for sure.
Okay.
That's what they had in the advertisements back in the day. So, so that is solved, kind of. You have to see it. It's solved in a very David Lynchian way, where it's like it's solved, but it's also weird, and
Is the murderer the backward talking guy in the red room?
Even if I knew that answer off the top of my head, I would not tell you, because that would be a very major spoiler if it was true. Spoiler. But what's interesting is if you ever watched shows from that time, particularly kind of like pulpy dramas from the 80s, it is absolutely that. And it's David Lynch getting weirder from episode to episode. So when you first watch the first couple episodes of the first season, it's kind of like, this feels like every 80s show. What's different about this? I don't get it, type of thing. And then you realize that he's been doing weird things. You just haven't realized it. And now that it's getting weirder and weirder, now you're like, oh, all of this other stuff that felt very normal is actually just set up for weirdness as it builds. And as a result, it's also a show that you kind of can't jump into mid-season.
Oh, I'm sure it started from the beginning. Yeah.
And it existed in an era where that's what they made for major television networks, are shows that you could watch this week and then not watch it for a month and then watch another episode. And generally they wanted you to be able to follow it. And you just couldn't do that with Twin Peaks. I mean, you could, you just wouldn't get the full effect, and it wasn't interested in filling in the story that you didn't see type of thing. It was interested in being very serious. It's very serialized. It's kind of like jumping into Breaking Bad, like season 3. It's like, can you understand generally what Breaking Bad's about? Sure. But you're not getting what the show actually is if you don't see those first 2.5 seasons.
Well, when I think about TV from the 80s and early 90s, it's very episodic, where there may be character progression throughout a season, but you're right. Most of the time, it's if you happen to turn on TV Friday night, 7 o'clock, you can watch Family Matters. And if you didn't see the last 3 episodes, you're not going to be that lost about why Carl Winslow and Steve Urkel aren't getting along.
Well, even at the time, like Dallas was a big show, and it was serialized, right? Yeah. There was a storyline from one episode to another, but you could skip an episode here or there, and it wasn't that big a deal. There's certain seminal episodes that you have to watch because that's when the big thing happened, normally at the end of a season or at the beginning of the next. But generally, it wasn't a show that built. Whereas Twin Peaks built. Then you got like the A-teams of the world where it's just whenever you want to jump in, that's the story for an hour. And then, next week they're going to do the same thing basically with different ingredients. And by season 2, which was the final original run season, I think there was only 2 seasons, pretty sure. It had gotten very weird, which meant that the people that were on board were very on board, but they were not gaining viewers anymore. And so that's why it got canceled, was because the station or the network realized, like, this is how big the show is going to get. And the people that like it really like it, but it's not going to get bigger. So they cancel it. But I've heard the Showtime show is even weirder and good. And Trent Reznor has a part in it and also does music for it, like literally wrote songs for the show. So it's been on my list of things. If only, I mean, I like Twin Peaks, but that on top of it made me attracted to watching it. But I haven't yet.
I've always been intrigued by the movie. So maybe I'll watch at least the first 2 seasons. And if I get into it, I can at least see the movie. Yep. I don't know if I want to see the Showtime series. I don't know. Maybe I'll get super into it. But as of right now, I'm more interested in the original run. Sure.
Cool. Also, Twin Peaks adjacent, there's a video game called Alan Wake. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it. I haven't played Alan Wake, but I played all the other games from that studio. Like Quantum Break and I think Control.
Yeah. I don't remember what studio did it.
I don't. Alan Wake is a 360 game, and Quantum Break and Control are on Xbox One. So they're their newer versions. But I do have Alan Wake on my hard drive.
Oh, and you never played it?
No, I want to after playing the other ones that I like. But I also know it's like it's a previous gen game. So I've kind of my headspace in the It's not going to look or play the same as, the other stuff I've been playing.
Sure. I don't play too many video games, but I loved Alan Wake. I thought it was really, really good. Like, just the play mechanics of it are really good, and the atmosphere and the storyline that it builds was just awesome, and it is very influenced by Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Like, down to the settings, and some of the props from Twin Peaks are in the video game. So it's definitely wears its influences on its sleeve as well. And they just announced like a remake of it for I think it's for all platforms this time.
Yep.
So they're going to remake it. I was hoping for a sequel at some point, but it also got a decent audience, but not like a big enough one for like another AAA title type of thing where, they spend $100 million to develop a video game. It's got to get a certain amount of sales. And I think it was too weird for like people into Call of Duty to play.
Who just want to like shoot things.
Right. And it literally only has the storyline. Like, there's no multiplayer element and no like fragging people, or you know what I mean? There's once you play through the game and get the storyline, there's nothing left to do with the game.
And but that's fine. Like, sometimes a game can just exist to tell a story. It's like reading a book or watching a movie. Like, okay,
I agree with that. But nowadays, if you're a game maker and you're going to put that much money into it, you want it to have like a multi-year shelf life with online play. And so it's hard for them to get those things
crates
made.
And things like that.
Right. Exactly. So it was a different era of video games, and those still come out, but they're like the God of Wars of the world and the Uncharted's, like the super mega hits are still getting those sequels without multiplayer online, but less and less of the, you either have little tiny indie titles or like the Uncharted and God of Wars where they have spent tons of money on them.
It's like movies. You either have your huge, franchise movies, or you have your under 10 million, and in the middle has been left out. Movies, video games, sure. Not different. No, it's no difference.
Definitely. All right, Logan, hopefully that answered your question. Let me know what you think of the Showtime series. Maybe I'll finally get off my butt and watch it if you say it's worth it. Cool. Well, let's jump into our review for this week. It's for a movie that's on HBO Max. It's also in theaters if you'd like to experience it there. I suggest HBO Max. The movie is called Cry Macho. Let's take a listen to a little clip. That was Cry Macho, a 2021 American neo-Western drama directed by Clint Eastwood, based on a book titled Cry Macho, starring Clint Eastwood, Dwight Yoakam, Edward Manet, Natalia Treven, Fernando Irajoya, I think is how you say that, amongst others. The official IMDb plot synopsis for Cry Macho is: a one-time rodeo star and washed-up horse breeder takes a job to bring a man's young son home and away from his alcoholic mom. On their journey, the horseman finds redemption through teaching the boy what it means to be a good man. That was a long one compared to...
That's a long one, yeah.
Compared to how they've been lately. But that's generally what the movie's about. Sure. Why not? What did you think of Cry Macho?
Yeah. So this movie set up a big red flag in the first 5 minutes, and I was hoping that it was just a misstep, but it did not recover. And that is, in the first 5 minutes, you've got Dwight Yoakam and Clint Eastwood plus a third guy in a room talking. And Dwight Yoakam does the thing where he recites a character's life story to that character, which is obviously in service of the audience. It's like a quick way to like, here, let's catch up on who this person is. But it was so clumsy And it's usually clumsy in any movie when someone's like reciting the resume to a person themselves. Like, yeah, I know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh boy, is this gonna be that kind of movie where we're just gonna be told things throughout? And the answer is yes, it is.
It's definitely that movie. In that scene, there's actually a third character that doesn't even have a line. He just sits there and listens like he's one of the audience.
Right. And it's not even like Dwight Yoakam is saying Clint Eastwood's resume to this third character, mm-hmm. which would at least make sense. Mm-hmm. He's saying it directly to Clint Eastwood. Like, so James, you were born in California, and then you, I don't know, worked for Moss Media, and now you do a podcast, and you've got a kid. You're like, yeah, I know this stuff, Kyle. Like, you don't need to recite it to me. So right off the bat, I'm like, okay, I'm dubious of the writing of this movie, and it never really recovered. I did not buy Clint Eastwood in this role at all. So he's 91 years old, and mm-hmm. it's commendable he is still making and starring in movies at 91.
Sure.
So I'm not going to fault him for that, but he's playing a character who I assume is supposed to be like in their 60s or 70s.
I don't know. I mean, I agree he's not supposed to be 91, but yeah. I don't know. I don't know about his 70s or 60s. Okay. He's just too old to pull that off.
He's told to pull off this role. You've got multiple times women are throwing themselves at him. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine women seeing him like we're talking middle-aged women. I can imagine them seeing him as like a cute, charming older gentleman to be friends, but not as like a sexual mate at all. So I didn't buy that whatsoever. Like, there's a love story here between like this woman in her 50s maybe and this guy in his 90s. Like, no, not buying that. And he just moves slow. Like, just it was kind of sad watching him shuffle between scenes.
Yeah, he moves like a man who's his age.
Who's 91 years old. Yeah, right. Yeah. And and like he's supposed to be kind of like he's kind of playing the tough version. You know, he throws in some one-liners here. He punches a guy out, things like that. But stuff I just don't buy. Mm-hmm. Someone at his age being able to pull off, who especially like has to shuffle through scenes. Mm-hmm. There was one moment where he's driving in the car with the kid, and there's a lot of driving in the car with the kid in this movie. And the kid's telling a story, and Clint Eastwood starts to yawn. And I don't know if that was an acting choice or if Clint Eastwood just yawned during that scene because he was tired or bored. Because he's notorious for like one take, like he does one takes per scene, right? Like he's not a guy who does it again. So I could see him being like, yawned, who cares, whatever, move on with it. Like,
what are they going to do? Fire me? I'm 91.
Right, exactly. There was moments where he would stumble over lines, and like I stumble over words, so I'm not faulting him for that. But like when you're making a movie, generally speaking, you want to get the line right. Mm-hmm. And there's moments where he would like get half a line out, would pause for a couple seconds, and I think he was trying to think of what the rest of the line was, and then come on. I don't know. Okay, yeah. That's enough on Clint Eastwood.
Sure.
I didn't buy the kid actor as a good actor whatsoever. He was probably 20 trying to play a 13-year-old.
I think he was supposed to be 15, but I agree. He was too old for the role.
He was too old. And his acting choice was either like concentrating off into the distance or wild-eyed. Those were his two facial expressions throughout the whole movie. And this movie just felt very low stakes the entire time. Mm-hmm. Like they're kind of being pursued by his mother, the boy's mother, who has like a private guard or something. And like there's even the briefest of car chases. Mm-hmm. And then they just end the car chase, switch cars and move on. And it's one of those things where like where'd the scene start, where'd the scene end? The car chase had nothing to do with the actual story because they started in a car and they ended in a car and nothing of consequence happened. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty bored by this movie. I was unimpressed, and I was kind of embarrassed for Clint Eastwood.
Wow.
Just because I think he still thinks he's something that he's not.
Interesting.
Maybe Gran Torino era, like Clint Eastwood 15 years ago could have pulled this role off no problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think Clint Eastwood now, he could have done this story if they had made it more of like a grandfather character and less of this whole
great grandfather
story.
Character.
Yeah, great grandfather character, and less of like trying, having this side love story and being the tough guy. I just don't buy it anymore. So this movie is about, it's called Cry Macho. It's machoism. There is one moment where he gives a speech to the kid about, like, when you're younger, you try and act like a man macho and be a big person, and like none of that really matters as you get older. And that felt like Clint Eastwood actually speaking some truth, because here's a guy who's played, these kind of macho manly characters his entire life. You look at his movies and the kind of people that he casts in them, and to see him at 91 kind of saying to this kid, like, yeah, that's not really that important, even though he made a career out of being that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was actually quite insightful. But that's a silver lining over a pretty boring cloud.
I think they were going for that in general with the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to get there, it was such an uneventful path, I would say. There's like a movement that I've heard about called nice core movies, which are movies where like nothing bad happens. And I think this slots in very nicely with that. It's just a movie where like there are stakes here and there and perceived danger, but the way it all plays out is like the most base, like the nicest way anything can work out. It worked out, I would say.
Yeah. I never thought that things would turn for the worse in this movie.
Right. Like even at one point, like a character pulls out a gun and in like seconds he's disarmed.
Yeah.
And not only is he disarmed, but like almost no violence to disarm him. Like it's just a nice movie about an old guy who goes and gets a boy. And even though there's threats of violence from the mother, who maybe is a drug dealer, but they didn't really say that, maybe has the power to like get her goons to chase him down and beat him up, but evidently not, because that's not where the movie goes. There's probably too many spoilers, but there's not much to this movie. So it's hard to even talk about it without considering something a spoiler, because there's just not much to it.
I found it boring at times because
I was pretty bored by it too.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine on that tiny, phone screen, really take it all in. What's supposed to be, I thought, like a road or a journey movie.
Mm-hmm.
They spend the vast majority of the movie in a town.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hardly on the road. They're hardly on the journey. Yeah,
the vast majority of the movie in a town, like, training horses and falling in love with like the local barmaid or whatever she was. I don't know what her job was.
Yeah, she ran a cafe.
Right.
She was 40 years his junior.
Yeah. I can't say I hated the movie, because I understood what it was. Once I got into the story, I was like, okay, well, this movie's never gonna hit the gas pedal. This is just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fine with that. And then the movie just kind of happened and ended, and I was like, oh, that was nice.
Yeah.
I'll never remember this or watch it again or I'll have nothing to do with this movie again. You know what I mean? Other than having this conversation on this podcast, I knew like this movie, it happened and we're all going to move on, and we're not going to hate this movie. We're not even going to remember that it exists because it's insignificant in general.
It is, but I can't even recommend it though. Like sometimes I'll see a movie like, yeah, that was fine. You could watch that. Like if you need to kill 100 minutes. I can't recommend this one as even a time killer.
I would recommend it to people who like Clint Eastwood movies, who want to watch Clint Eastwood movies. Is it a great Clint Eastwood movie? No, but I've seen a couple not great Clint Eastwood movies. I've seen Clint Eastwood movies that I absolutely would never want to see again and would never recommend anybody watch. Whereas with this one, if you were a Clint Eastwood fan and wanted to see probably the last movie he's going to direct, I wouldn't say you're going to hate watching this. It's not going to be your favorite, guaranteed. You're probably going to forget about it, but it is interesting to see. The only interesting thing about it is watching him at this age play out this character. Could it have been done in a better way? Absolutely. Like, I kind of wish The Mule was his last movie, because that to me was the perfect old man Clint Eastwood movie. Did you see The Mule?
I did not see The Mule. I haven't seen the Clint Eastwood since American Sniper.
You absolutely should see The Mule, I would say, because it's him. He's definitely older. You know, I think he was like 86 or 87 when he filmed that. So he's very much the same old man puttering around type guy. But it has a wit to it. He's a guy who's transporting drugs in his old beat up truck, and nobody ever suspects him of it because he's really old. And he can kind of talk his way out of things because nobody expects anything of him for the most part. And there's this side story about his kids, and he used to be like a traveling flower salesman. So he knows a lot about flowers, and his kids like don't really know him because he wasn't around much because he was a traveling salesman. And so there's opportunities for relationship dynamics and kind of similar themes to Cry Macho, where it's kind of like man regrets life. Even though he provided for his family, he did it in a way where, you know, he missed out on a lot of life type of thing. And so there's still a lesson to it that still kind of you can see in Clint Eastwood's own life, right? Like as an actor and a famous person, you can see him trying to play around with those ideas. And I don't know if the difference is 4 years of age. He just feels snappier in The Mule. Whereas in this one, he just didn't feel like he was all together. Not that he wasn't there mentally. It's just the way he played it, which might just be where he's at in his age. This might be as fast as he can go. There just wasn't anything. Even when the dialogue felt like it was supposed to be a little bit with an edge, like a little snap to it, he just delivered it like an old guy delivered a line he memorized.
Yeah, it missed. I go back to Gran Torino. That's like the last really good Clint Eastwood performance I remember seeing. And he's obviously older than me. He's mid-70s in that one, so he's up there already. But in Gran Torino, like, he is delivering these lines that are funny and witty, and like it has that edge and that like that kind of crispness to them. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's been 15 years, so people age a lot, especially, you know, as you get through your 80s and 90s. But it just was, it's not the Clint Eastwood. It's not the Clint Eastwood I want to remember.
Yeah. Not to go back to The Mule, but a lot of your complaints, which I agree with Cry Macho, where it's like the love interest and punching out another guy and a couple other things that just feel out of tune with what the reality of a 91-year-old would be. None of that's in The Mule. You know what I mean? Everybody responds to him as the old guy, and he's just the old guy that drives and cracks jokes. And that made total sense for the age that he was at. And I kind of wish he had stopped at The Mule at this point. I think you could definitely watch The Mule. You'd be like, this is so much better than Cry Macho.
Maybe as a palate cleanser for Eastwood then.
Yeah. And like The Mule is entertaining because he's probably the funniest in The Mule than any movie I've ever seen him in, just because he's just constantly cracking jokes to people to drug dealers who are using him to transport drugs, but they don't really trust him because he's, you know, this random white guy. Yeah. Anyway, anything else with Cry Macho? There's not much to really say about it.
I mean, not a lot really happens. You're watching a man who's 91, but no one is treating him like he's 91.
Right. Yeah.
And not in like we should be using like soft kid gloves, but like no one recognizes that this is a great grandfather who's out here driving around.
Yeah, I mean, even the mission he's given, like go to Mexico, find this kid and bring him back, was like, why would you ask somebody of his age to do that?
I'm trying to imagine my grandfather. He was 91. If I went to him and said, hey, by the way, I need you to drive across the border, go rescue this kid from his crazy mother. He'd be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, at the wedding I was at over the weekend, there were like a couple people in their late 80s and 90s, and none of them were going to Mexico to go track down a kid and then bring them back.
Which he finds like the only cockfight in Mexico City.
Yeah. Yep. It was
that kind of lazy stuff where they're like, oh, he's at the rooster fights. So he walks down one alley and then boom, there are the rooster fights and like there's the kid.
The most well-lit rooster fight ever, too.
Yeah.
And not by like cinematically well-lit, just like there was not a shadow in the place.
No, they had like these huge floor lamps all around shining down on that fight.
Yeah, then they also didn't explain like him and the kid hid behind boxes.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
Crates. And then they cut to the police pulling up and like running, like about to run in the room. And then they just kind of like transitioned to the police leaving. But for some reason, the kid and Clint Eastwood were the only two that hid behind boxes in the cockfighting room. Everybody else ran away.
And Clint Eastwood hid behind like it's like one of those 6-foot boxes that's in the middle of the floor. He's not in a corner.
Right.
Like he was just standing there. He sees the lights. He steps behind this box.
How
like
did
a
the
toddler
police
would
not
hide.
How did the police
Right.
not find him?
Like they're in a circular room. You think they didn't like walk around the room? Yeah, and that was the kind of writing stuff. The exposition, it felt lazy.
For
like
sure.
they wanted to tell the story in at least amount of pages as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Supposedly this has been in development. It's based on a book that was written quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And went through a couple other casting choices. Arnold Schwarzenegger at one point was attached to it.
Yeah.
In 2011. Burt Lancaster and Pierce Brosnan at one point were in talks. Very different movies if those guys had done it, for sure.
Burt Lancaster, is that like in the 90s they're going to do that?
I'm assuming it wasn't recent. I would imagine.
I do think this movie would have been worse with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I don't know about worse. It would not have been this movie. I guarantee you that.
I would have bought. I guess I bought more a 91-year-old man as a rancher going on this journey than an Austrian man who was a former rancher going on this journey.
Mm-hmm. So supposedly the kid or the guy, the man, the actor who played the kid, mm-hmm. They replaced him at the last minute because the actor that they had cast tested positive for coronavirus during the filming. So they just restarted with a new actor.
And even if Clint Eastwood's vaccinated at that age, you're not taking any chances.
Yeah. Do you think Clint Eastwood's vaccinated?
Yeah, I imagine he is.
He's pretty hardcore,
I don't think he's that. I mean, he's a conservative Republican, but I don't think he's like that hardcore.
I don't know. He's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I imagine he is. I just think because he's that old, he's still working in movies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's a Trumper, but
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, maybe not. He's more like a 90s, 80s conservative than a 2010s conservative, maybe. I don't know.
He did the whole bit with talking to Obama, the empty chair that was Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So he got a little bit into like our 21st century politics, but even there, I mean, he made a movie about physician-assisted suicide, or not physician-assisted suicide, but like helping a person die. That pretty much goes against a lot of his conservative credentials.
What movie was that?
Well, that's a spoiler.
It is? I don't remember that movie. Maybe I haven't seen it.
$1 Million Baby?
Oh, right. The movie was not about assisted suicide. Come on.
Okay, but that's okay,
it did have it in
Baby.
it, but it wasn't about that.
Okay, it wasn't about it, but
I was like, did he star in a Dr. Kevorkian biopic? I don't remember.
No.
Or
all right, true. It's not about it, but that was sort of like a big third act part of the story right there.
Sure. Okay. I'll give you that it's a part of the story. I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on from Cry Macho, a movie that I doubt will be on our top 10 neo-Western lists, but we'll see. What are you going to give Cry Macho, Letterboxd style?
I'm 2 stars.
Yeah, I think I'm 2 as well. I think there's like a more average version of this, which would give it a 2.5. I think this is like less than average, really.
Agreed.
And you remove Clint Eastwood from it and put like a no-name actor in it, and it's like a 1. Like the only reason this is getting anything is because Clint Eastwood is in it and directs it.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been just about any other 91-year-old actor, I don't think it would be on HBO Max right now.
I know he's dead. I could see Hal Holbrook playing this role, though.
Right, but do you think it would get the attention it's getting right now with Hal Holbrook in the lead role?
Not now, but I'm sure it would be a better movie with a better performance that would actually like become the last great Hal Holbrook performance.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. All right. Cry Macho. 2 2s. Let's jump into our top 10 neo-Western films. This is a top 10 list. We do these on the podcast occasionally. We're going to run down from our least favorite to most favorite neo-Western films. We kind of predefined this off podcast, but I'm curious if we just also retained that criteria for what a neo-Western film is. How did you define it, Kyle?
Well, I Googled neo-Western and went to the Wikipedia page.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I define our movies. But for me, and I think the definition we kind of talked about off podcast is that a neo-Western is a movie that's contemporary. So it's not taking place, pre-post Civil War, like your traditional Western.
Mm-hmm.
Taking place either in the 20th or the late 20th or the 21st century. I do have one that's early 20th century, but that's because it was made a little bit after that. So it's contemporary for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it still retains the themes of a Western. It could be the overt themes of bank robberies, gunslingers, horse riding, or it can have some more of the subtler themes like redemption. A lot of movie Westerns are about dealing with change because, the big thing about the West being developed. And I think redemption, change, and sort of sticking up for oneself are a lot of themes that we look for in these movies too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally use the same definition. Maybe some of mine might not have those specific Western plot beats, but are definitely vibe movies where it's like, this feels like a Western, even if it doesn't have those themes. It's just set in modern day type of thing. But mine's not going to break out from that mold too much, except for my number 10. I'll go first.
Go.
I'm kind of bummed Zach's not here because this is a first on this podcast.
I think I know what this is.
My number 10 is Breaking Bad, the TV show. / El Camino. If you really need it to be connected to a movie, you could say El Camino for sure. But El Camino is basically just the same format as the TV show, just in a 2-hour movie. But I feel very much like the TV show is definitely the best example of neo-Western content that we've had in the last 10 years or so. More than 10 years now. I think 2008 is when Breaking Bad started. So it's been more than 10 years since it started. But yeah, Breaking Bad, just the whole series feels like a neo-Western format, where you kind of have the anti-hero, you have getting revenge, you have redemption, you have characters just going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. It's just it's a great series. El Camino is a good representation of that in movie form. Not the best thing about Breaking Bad, certainly, but a worthy thing related to Breaking Bad. And that's why I give it my number 10, and it will be the only thing on this list that's not a movie.
I thought your number 10 was going to be The Postman.
No, that's not on my list.
Not going to happen. Okay.
Postman isn't good enough to make my list.
It's kind of a Western.
Well, there's lots of things that were neo-Westerns that didn't make my list because they weren't good enough.
Well, so I had trouble getting 10. I actually had to watch 2 extra movies to make my list because I was going off a pretty narrow list of like what is a neo-Western, which is fine. But my number 10, because I needed to make 10, is going to be Cry Macho, the movie we just watched.
Oh, it did make one of our lists.
It did make my list only because I had exactly 10.
You were more strict with things I'm getting.
Yeah, I was a little bit more like it had to have like a Western feel to it or those Western themes for it to make my list, not just be a movie that takes place in the West. I could see now putting samurai movies on this list because so many samurai movies influence Western, but then I just realized we're talking neo-Western and those are not neo whatsoever. So I'm going to back off that statement right away.
Sure.
But yeah, my number 10, Cry Macho. Did not care for it. I also kind of order these by how Western they feel. So it's a bit of preference and a bit of the Westernness of the whole thing.
Okay. My number 9 is from 2017. It's Let the Corpses Tan, which I believe is the English of the original title. It's a French movie. The original title, Sure, I'll try to pronounce this.
Go for it.
Laissez bronzer les cadavres.
Impeccable.
Flawless French, I know. I went there for a week, so I learned French while I was there.
You are now a Francophile.
So Let the Corpses Tan, short movie. It's about 90 minutes, super fast. It's like these robbers. I don't remember if they actually say they're bank robbers. They stole something and they're hiding out up in the hills where there's like these houses, abandoned houses, like built into the countryside. And so they're kind of like running through these houses, which are connected to each other, and they're being hunted. And then there's like this really long shootout towards the back half of the film. It's just one really long shootout where they're just running around this cool location up in the hills. And it was a super fun movie. It's pretty awesome. It's hard to follow like the actual storyline. Like not only is it in a different language, it's just very sparse in the story. It's just like it's kind of like Reservoir Dogs, where you get some backstory on some of the characters over the course, but like it's a very simple premise and you're just kind of waiting for it to play out or waiting for it to get to the shootout. And then once they start the shootout, it kind of doesn't disappoint because it's relentless for half an hour to 45 minutes. And if you like Westerns and you like shootouts, don't expect much more from this, but it's a good one. That's fairly recent too.
Nothing wrong with a good shootout. My number 9 is the previously mentioned El Camino, a Breaking Bad story, movie, whatever. Yeah. I watched it for this episode. It's a movie that's had been on my watch list forever. But it's on Netflix. So it's kind of like, it's always going to be there. I can watch it whenever I want. And whenever I want just took years. I got around to it. And it was nice to be back in the Breaking Bad world. I rewatched the series at the beginning of the pandemic. It seemed like a good thing to watch at the time. And got into Better Call Saul, and it was nice to finally see the movie and kind of get more of Jesse's story. And I like this movie, but it sits at number 9 because although the Breaking Bad universe feels very Western, the movie itself exists within the universe, but doesn't quite have as many of those Western themes as some of the other movies on my list. So number 9.
Cool. My number, what is this?
Your number 8.
My number 8 is The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, Melquiades Estrada, which we just talked about like 2 weeks ago when we were talking forgotten films of 2005. And it's directed by Tommy Lee Jones and stars Barry Pepper and also Dwight Yoakam, who was in Cry Macho. He played the guy who gave Clint Eastwood the task. So it has a weird cast crossover from our main film for this week. But this is a much better movie, I would say, than Cry Macho for sure.
Yeah.
We talked about it a lot a couple of weeks ago, so I won't go too much into it. But basically, Tommy Lee Jones plays a guy who's... what is it? His Mexican friend gets killed, and so he goes on a mission to bury him in Mexico, something like that. And
yeah, Barry Pepper plays a border agent who mistakenly kills Melquiades.
Right. So he kind of drags Barry Pepper along and teaches him a lesson about killing Mexicans. I don't remember exactly, but it's a good one. Yeah. I like this movie.
Good pick. My number 8 is Rango. This is another movie that I watched specifically for this episode that you recommended to me. Mm-hmm. This is a animated film directed by Gore Verbinski, starring Johnny Depp as his voice in that case. Mm-hmm. And then, help me out here. Is it Isla Fisher or Isla Fisher? How do you pronounce her first name?
I believe it's Isla.
But okay.
I don't know that definitively.
We'll go Isla. That makes more sense. In Rango, this is kind of an odd movie. I guess you can call it a kids movie. It's animated. Johnny Depp he voices a chameleon who, it's a house chameleon who finds himself in the desert and amongst a town of other desert animals, kind of like an old West town, even though it takes place, I think, contemporary times. Mm-hmm. And he kind of talks his way into being the new sheriff in town. And is tasked with both defending against the bandits, but there's also kind of this there's sort of this Chinatown water plot going on in the background too. I think my review on this for this movie on Letterboxd was Chinatown plus Old West cliches minus incest equals Rango.
Sure.
So, yeah, you even have like the main mayor is based on John Huston from Chinatown, like in his voice. I think Ned Beatty voices him in his dress, everything. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. It was, to me, it was just a little too cliche. Like I think for kids they would enjoy it because it's probably new to them, but it just kind of hit on every Western cliche. So I sort of knew where I was going. Not that I enjoy it. I did like the design of the creatures though, because they are not like the cuddly Disney or Illumination version of animals. They're sort of, they're kind of realistic looking. They got kind of crazy eyes, crazy fur, and they're a little, I don't call them grotesque, but they're a little closer to what an actual anthropomorphized rabbit will look like. And so visually, I appreciate the fact that it looked different than any other kids' movies I'd seen. But plot-wise, it sort of hit all the beats I was expecting it to.
Yeah, so I think I suggested this one to you because you were looking for other neo-westerns to watch. And you asked me if it was kid-friendly. Did you watch this with your son?
I did not.
Okay. Do you believe that I was correct that he could have handled it, or would it have been traumatizing? Because I rewatched it and I was like, maybe this is too much for what, a 6-year-old? Is that what you have?
Almost 6, yeah.
Yeah.
It was visually, I think he could have handled it. But it does the thing where like the humor is just a little too rude for where I want him to be at his age. Like I could see 9, 10, 11-year-olds be fine with it. Maybe 11-year-old be like, it's a kid's movie, but like, 3rd, 4th grade, sure. But for a kindergartner, I'm like, I don't want to, I'm not ready to quite go there yet.
Sure.
Not that like I sanitize his life. The kid listens to heavy metal, so.
Right. But yeah, but it's different, especially with like you described it hesitantly as like some of the characters being grotesque. That was probably my concern more when I rewatched it. I was like, I don't remember the characters being this kind of just like baseline scary looking. Some of them are scary looking, even if they're nice characters. They just have a design that's way more realistic, but like just a slightly twisted realistic version. Yeah. Which is definitely a choice, and it makes it stand out amongst all the other kids' animated movies, for better or for worse. I think it fits within this Western motif, but I could see it little kids possibly getting nightmares just from the character design.
Yeah.
Potentially.
We've been lucky so far. Nothing that he's seen has triggered any nightmares, but we'll keep trying.
When you were a kid, did you have nightmares? From like a piece of content?
Oh, I did. Yes.
Okay.
What's that? The Witches with Angelica Houston. You know what I'm talking about?
I roughly do.
And the Matilda girl.
Mm-hmm. This was a movie, right?
I think it's called The Witches. Yeah. I had a thing with witches. That was like I was scared of witches when I was a little kid.
Sure.
And I saw the movie The Witches. And at this point, I was not even like a little kid. I was probably 8 or something like that. And there's one point where Angelica Houston, who plays a witch, like removes her human skin mask and reveals like her grotesque, twisted witch face. And that did not go over well with me whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. If you search The Witches, Angelica Houston, it's like the first image.
That right there. So
pretty crazy. I could see how that could do it for you, for sure.
Did not. Yeah, that didn't go over well for me.
So. The only piece of media that I remember consistently getting nightmares about was this TV show called DC Follies. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
I think that's what it was called. DC Follies. DC Follies Syndicate. Yeah. Maybe it's this. Yes. Search it up. DC Follies.
DC Follies
is basically a political puppet show where there was like a bartender played by Fred Willard. He was the only human character. Maybe not the only, but he was the main human character. And then all these puppets came in Washington, set in Washington, D.C. These puppets of different political politicians would come in and like eat dinner and have drinks and crack jokes around a table. But for some reason, the puppets gave me nightmares because they're like slightly off of reality, I would say.
Yeah, the puppets are kind of have this uncanny valley thing going on.
Right.
Is that a Rodney Dangerfield puppet?
Probably.
It's got like big bug eyes. Yeah. Oh yeah. I could see how this could be. One looks like maybe Dolly Parton and Cher, and those. Yeah, I can see how like as a kid you could be disturbed by those. I get it. Absolutely.
Started in 1987, so I think I was like 10 probably when this was a thing. And scared like watching it didn't scare me for some reason. I watched it like regularly, but then I would have these crazy nightmares about it. And of course it never stopped me from watching it. I would just get weirder and weirder nightmares. I don't know why. All right. Let's get back to it. My number 7 is from 1991, and it's a comedy called City Slickers, which I enjoy a lot. Yeah. I like City Slickers, starring Billy Crystal and Daniel Stern from Home Alone. Plays one of the Wet Bandits, I think they were called. What a weird name for that crime duo. Why were they called the Wet Bandits?
It's briefly mentioned at the beginning. And it's actually Daniel Stern. He wants them to have like a calling card. So their thing is he like stuffs a sock in the sink to plug it and then turns the water on. So it also floods the house.
Oh, yeah. That's like how they would do it. That's their calling card, right?
That was their calling card. But it's something where they don't make a big deal out of it. It's kind of like sort of mentioned at the beginning. And I even think the Joe Pesci character is like, that's dumb. Like, why do we have to have a calling card?
And he's like, it's who we are. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but City Slickers, if you remember Billy Crystal from the late 80s, early 90s, it's basically his biggest movie, I would say, short of the Pixar movies later that he did voices for. I haven't seen it in a while. I don't know if the jokes are very early 90s. I suspect they are, but hopefully the setting means that some of it would stand the test of time. But honestly, I haven't seen it in 25 years probably. So I could not tell you. I have it on the shelf on Blu-ray. I just haven't bothered to pop it in yet. I think I've seen the first one 2 or 3 times and the second one once. So I couldn't tell you whether the second one is, even remotely good at this point. But I do remember City Slickers standing up to a second viewing, and I enjoy it. My number 7.
That's one of those movies that was on cable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've seen bits and pieces of it, but never actually sat down for a complete sitting.
Sure.
All right, my number 7 is a 2017 movie called Wind River. This is starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen. In this movie, Elizabeth Olsen plays a FBI agent who is investigating, it's either a murder or murders of Native American women on a reservation. And Jeremy Renner plays, I think, like a game warden hunter who teams up with her because he knows the land, he knows the people. He's not Native American, but he still helps her in investigating these murders. And this movie kind of has a not like a Gone Girl vibe, but sort of that gritty crime drama thing going on. I don't know. Help me out here. Name another movie that would be like Mystic River or
another river movie.
Right, another river movie directed by Clint Eastwood of all people. But it's kind of in that vein where, it's a pretty serious movie. There's murders. I think there's some grisly stuff that happens. The main characters are in danger as they get more and more into this world of trying to investigate what's happening. But it does focus on violence against Native American women, which is a story we don't see very often. So I remember that standing out. And it all takes place in this, it's a Western, but it's in this, I think the high Rockies or high Sierras. So it's all in the snow for the most part.
Yeah. And it's set in modern times. It's not
that too. Yes. It's a neo-Western.
Right. You got it. My number 6. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I'm just saying, like, Wind River, if we ever do Forgotten Films of 2017, like, this would be one of those movies that goes on that list where we all saw it, but we can't remember that came out in 2017.
It's a Tyler Sheridan movie, right? Director of Hell or High Water, I believe. I think it was his follow-up.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Yep. My number 6 is from 2011. It's the aforementioned Rango, which I like that movie. Yeah. I think it's underappreciated. I'm not going to say it's, my favorite kids movie of all time, but I do think it holds a spot in my brain as unique amongst animated kids movies, certainly 3D animated kids movies. I think probably on rewatch, I didn't remember quite as many adult themes in it. Not strictly adult, just more attractive to adults probably than kids. Like some of the Western jokes, I think most kids wouldn't even understand. Yeah. But if you're a fan of Westerns, makes total sense. And some of it's fairly clever, not necessarily laugh out loud funny, but the Chinatown references, I'm not even sure Western fans would understand unless
it's a completely different genre they're going for there.
Right. But whoever wrote that movie, obviously a fan of Chinatown. And I also think that it's a good Johnny Depp performance, like as the voice of the main lizard or gecko or whatever he is. He's just very, I think if you know Johnny Depp's voice, you're going to recognize it, but you're not going to be, if you're put off by Johnny Depp performances, live action performances, I don't think his voicing the character in this will turn you off. I think it's a fairly straightforward performance. And I really enjoy the different like esoteric touches to the movie. Like the moments where he's like going through sunstroke and like he's like tripping on things that are happening around him. And
oh yeah,
there's a few moments in the movie where that type of stuff happens, where it's just a little otherworldly. And that's definitely one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. It's either the third or the fourth.
I think it's the third one. He's like on the island and it's kind of weird.
Right.
Yeah.
So Gore Verbinski made the Pirates movies with Johnny Depp, and so I think they were just into those types of scenes. There's also a there's a Hunter S. Thompson joke in this.
Yeah, he makes like his character, Johnny Depp's character from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, makes a cameo appearance in Rango.
Right. Yeah, and spoiler for the people who haven't seen it, not that this is a plot point, but Clint Eastwood makes an appearance in Rango too.
No, that's not Clint Eastwood.
It's supposed to be Clint Eastwood. It's not actually Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, it's Timothy Olyphant.
Right.
I wonder if they wrote that for Clint Eastwood and were like, hey, come do this part. And he's like, no. So they got, all right, who's next best? Timothy Olyphant.
That's entirely possible. But the visualization of that cameo is Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's his likeness. I wonder if they got permission from the studio, or if it's the same studio. It's possible.
Yeah, possibly. And Timothy Olyphant's doing his best Clint Eastwood impression also. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I think there's a lot to like in Rango. Probably the visual style is why it didn't really go over. And who's it for, really, right? Like, if it's not for kids,
it's a weird movie in that sense.
Yeah, it's hard to define who it's for, but I think more people should see it, and I think the people that like it will like it.
Yeah. All right. My number 6 is the apparently talked to death about movie on this podcast, The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada.
We never talked about that movie up until 2 episodes ago, and now it's coming up twice.
Now it's coming up twice. I don't have really nothing else to add to this. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, go listen to Forgotten Films of 2005.
My number 5 is from 2017. It's Logan, the comic book movie, the last Wolverine solo film, directed by James Mangold, and featuring Hugh Jackman as the Wolverine character. In theory, in the last movie, he was going to act as that character. And
in theory,
we'll see. Marvel's got a lot of money, so
I'm not sure how much he's making a Reminiscence, so he may need some of that Marvel money again.
Yep. Also has Patrick Stewart in it, reprising his Professor X role. And I mean, this one came out of nowhere for me, because the other 2 Wolverine movies, like the first Wolverine movie is awful, but the second one's fine. And by the time they got around to Logan, I was kind of like, I mean, James Mangold made the Wolverine movie that was just fine. So what's the third one going to be, And then it turns out that it's pretty great. Like, not only as a comic book movie, but also as a capper for a fairly complicated comic book character. It's probably one of my favorite solo superhero films, even though it does cross with like the Patrick Stewart character. It crosses the major major X-Men movies with that character, but it's just such a different version of Professor X in this, even though it's the same actor. And it very much feels like a Western, and they pulled it off. They made it took 3 times, but they made a good to great solo Wolverine movie. And then they said, we're done. And that's the way to do it, I would say. My number 5.
All right. My number 5 is a 1948 movie that takes place in the 1920s, but it's still contemporary for that era, more or less. And that is The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. It's directed by John Huston, aforementioned, and starring Humphrey Bogart and a couple other people whose names you probably would not recognize. This is a story about gold prospectors in the 1920s, and they are all searching for gold for different reasons, for redemption, for hope, for, trying to get their life back together. These 3 men find gold, and that's not the movie, though. Like, the movie is, how do they then now handle becoming newly rich, get off the mountain, and keep their gold without running into problems with the authorities and mostly with each other. I mean, this is a classic movie. It's got the line, "We don't need no stinking badges," which is probably not the actual line, but that's from this movie. It's about paranoia, about people not trusting each other, and it's all over money. About the kind of what does gold, what does money do to a man? So this is, very much to me within those Western themes. Also a classic movie I've not seen in a long time, but I would definitely love to revisit. I do enjoy Humphrey Bogart.
I've seen it as well. I think I watched it while this podcast was in existence, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I don't typically love movies from, the 40s. So that's saying something.
Well, it's a movie it's not shot like a play. Like, it's on location. They're in the mountains. They're out camping and digging through gold. So it doesn't look like a 40s movie in that sense.
Yeah. It has that going for it, that it doesn't feel like a stage play, but it is black and white.
It is black and white. You got to get over that hump.
But and it has a little bit of that Humphrey Bogart like swing to it, but not enough to feel cheesy to me. Like, sometimes his movies feel like, even if they're not shot like a stage play, the performance is big enough that it's like, this is not a real person. This is an actor. Whereas in this, I'm not saying it felt real. It just didn't feel overdone to me.
When he plays bar owners a lot. And Casablanca is his most famous role, but even that, you feel like you're watching Humphrey Bogart play the character. In this movie, since he's not quite playing such a defined character, he's kind of more in the dirt with everyone. I think he's doing a little more acting, a little less being Bogart.
For sure. My number 4 is from 1992. It's Robert Rodriguez's classic, El Mariachi. The first of the El Mariachi movies. They made 3. There's a trilogy. I like all 3. But the first one is pretty amazing, if only because they spent $7,000 making it. And it's pretty awesome considering, like, $7,000 is a number low enough that, like, you and I, if we wanted to make a movie, we could round up $7,000.
I could find $7,000.
Yeah, we could find $7,000. Now, could we make what he made in Mexico for $7,000? I don't know if you could do that here in the U.S. Just because things are more expensive. It's 30 years later, so things are generally more expensive on top of they're just more expensive here in the U.S. Not only that, but like, they did stunts in that movie that you should not do on a $7,000 budget, but they did them. Everybody survived it, and the rest is history.
You cannot do here at all,
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you like Robert Rodriguez movies, you've seen El Mariachi, but it's pretty great. I'm reading on Wikipedia. It's the movie made the National Film Registry here in the U.S. in 2011, so it's permanently cemented in the National Film Registry here in the U.S. And it also holds the Guinness World Record as the lowest budgeted film ever to gross $1 million at the box office, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, if you like modern Westerns, if you like shootouts, and you haven't seen El Mariachi, I'd be shocked if you like those things and you haven't seen El Mariachi. But if you've been sleeping on it, check it out. It'll hold up.
Well, prepare to be shocked, because I've not seen El Mariachi.
Well, get to it. It's an easy watch.
That's James' shocked face right there. Oh. My number 4 is actually a top 100 movie for me. And this is Brokeback Mountain from 2005. Starring Heath Ledger, Jake Gyllenhaal, Michelle Williams, and Anne Hathaway. And I always forgot that Anne Hathaway is in this movie. It's kind of sort of I don't know if a breakout role for her, but maybe more of a dramatic role for her from like Princess Diaries. So in this movie, Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal play 2 sheep ranchers in the 60s who are tasked with sheep herding for the summer, protecting a herd of sheep from wolves. And while they're out ranching, they develop a relationship with each other, a really strong bond and love for each other. But it's their cowboys. It's the 60s. And obviously, being gay in the 60s, being gay within their line of work is not acceptable whatsoever. So it's sort of a movie about the pain they go through with trying to deal with their feelings throughout their life as they get married, have kids, and keep running into each other. I think this is a beautiful movie, both story-wise and visually. And it's a movie that just... when I saw it in 2005, for whatever reason, struck a chord with me, and it's one of my favorite movies. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I do have it on Blu-ray, so I'm ready to hop back into it. But it's great. I think everyone should check out Brokeback Mountain.
I agree. I also agree it's a neo-Western, but it didn't make my list because for some reason I just don't think of it that way. I think of it more as like a romance movie.
Yeah, it's definitely the West is the setting, but the main thrust is a romance. And
it is a spin on the politics of cowboys too. So
correct, yeah.
It is, like I said, it is a neo-Western. I just didn't. It's a great movie that didn't make my list because I just don't think of it in that way.
I was also kind of thinking, for the most part in Western movies, romance is not a huge subject.
Mm-hmm.
And
if
even
it is, it's definitely like the guy gets the complexity and the woman's just like the object.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And a lot of Western characters are almost asexual too. Like think about Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name character.
Mm-hmm.
Just, yeah.
There's nothing to it. Yeah.
There's nothing to it in that sense. Yeah. Which is interesting. That it's not a prominent theme within Westerns. So yeah, I could see why you could leave out Brokeback Mountain. I get it.
Agreed. My number 3, another movie from 2017. Somehow there's 3 movies from 2017 on my list.
Right.
This one is called The Rider. This is Chloe Zhao's Western, neo-Western. It was the movie she made before Nomadland, which she recently won all kinds of awards for. And it is, for my money, a better movie than Nomadland. And that's not saying Nomadland's bad, but The Rider just captivated me and is awesome. I can't wait to see it again someday. It's about a cowboy who's fairly young, who gets injured and wants to return to cowboying, and the doctors are saying like that's a really bad idea. Like all it's going to take is one accident and you're not going to wake up, basically, if you get hit in the head. And he's like, this is my entire this has been my entire life, and it's all I've ever wanted to do, and you're telling me I can't do it anymore. And it's one of those movies where it's like, is it worth the risk? If you love something, even though it could potentially kill you, is it worth the risk?
Mm-hmm.
Because the alternative is not doing the thing that you love. And it's definitely made like in a similar tone to Nomadland, where it's like there's a plot, but it's not, super heavy handed. It's just kind of casually moving you from one scene to another. But much like Nomadland, one of the best things about Nomadland, in my opinion, were the non-actors.
Mm-hmm. And
in The Rider, it's pretty much the entire cast is non-actors. And so there's also 2 characters, the main character and his sister who has autism, their brother and sister in real life. And so even though they're playing characters in the movie, they have an interaction that I don't think you could get from 2 actors. Like their interactions just totally feel natural. And while she has autism, she's a teenager. Uh-huh. And so it's a different depiction of autism than you typically get in these kinds of movies. Normally it feels like younger people than the character that she's playing. And there's also a performance from an actor who's physically disabled, that is like, you'll never forget the movie, basically, because of that performance. So if Nomadland not necessarily put you off, but you didn't understand the hype, go watch The Rider because you'll understand the hype as far as Chloe Zhao goes. I am deathly curious to see The Eternals, which is her Marvel movie, because if you've only seen Nomadland, it doesn't make sense that she's making a Marvel movie. If you've seen The Rider and Nomadland, there's a pattern there where you're like, oh, this wasn't like she made one movie, but that wasn't really her style, and now she's making Marvel movies. She made 2 that were that style, and now she's making a Marvel movie. So, like, how much are they going to assimilate her into the Marvel style versus like how much can she retain that's not the Marvel style? I'm guessing Marvel style won out in the end, but we'll see.
I can imagine so. I'm sure Marvel says, here's a movie you're supposed to make.
Right.
You can do X, Y, but not Z.
Right. Or we can talk about Z.
Yeah.
But we also want you to film X, Y just in case.
Exactly.
For sure. Do you think Marvel will ever hire a high enough profile director that they're allowed to do literally whatever they want?
Like a Nolan or a Spielberg or someone like that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so, because I think part of the Marvel model is they can get directors a little on the cheaper side.
Yeah. Up and comers that have a name, but not like a huge name.
Exactly. And Marvel wants things done a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine if you bring in a Nolan, a Spielberg, Scorsese, I don't know. I'm trying to think like who are the big names who are making movies.
Like Fincher,
yeah. They want to do things. I mean, these are all people who are very controlling of their productions and how their movies are made. Mm-hmm. I think that's one reason why they become the names that they are, is because they have such a grip on what their movies look like. Mm-hmm. But I don't imagine any of those directors taking studio notes very well.
Yeah, probably not. But I imagine like some of those directors, those style, like Chloe Zhao, I could imagine being somebody who, in a different world where a Marvel universe or a Marvel Cinematic Universe didn't exist, like if that opportunity just wasn't out there 10 years ago, she would continue to make these style movies like The Rider and Nomadland. And I think the only reason she gets away with selling out this early is because it is this early, right? If she had the filmography of like a P.T. Anderson and then went and did a Marvel movie, people would be like, what?
What are you doing?
Right. Yeah. And they're doing that. I mean, I'm doing that right now, saying what? But at the same time, 3 movies in doesn't feel like a sellout yet.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, it's not. I don't know. I don't know if I like the word sellout, because isn't that every artist's dream is to get paid to make their art?
Right, but is it really your art when they hand you the script and the visual effects team has already been working on it before you got hired? You know what I mean? Like,
that's true. Yeah.
That's how these movies are made at this point.
I would say that the Star Wars franchise has a stronger chance of getting a big name director. Mm-hmm. Like, they already have Rian Johnson, who was established by that point. J.J. Abrams established. Ron Howard established. Mm-hmm. Like, they, for better or for worse, Star Wars can land those more established directors. Where the Marvel and I think Star Wars has tried the up and coming model, and like it's failed both times for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, they also seem to have given their directors more leeway, and then they get cold feet while things are happening.
Well, yeah, like they gave, I think Rian Johnson's the best example, where they seemed to let Rian Johnson make the movie he wanted, and then got cold feet after the fact, and brought Abrams back to like retcon the entire thing.
Yeah, and with Rogue One and with Solo, those are both movies that had younger, lesser known directors, but like if you knew them, they were names, like Josh Trank with what was it, Solo, that he was supposed to direct originally?
I thought it was Lord and Miller who were doing Solo.
It was Lord and Miller. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But those didn't get released before they, got rid of the people directing and found replacements and
got Howard to come in.
Tuned him.
Did Rogue One have directorial problems too?
Yeah.
I know it had editing and reshoots. Did they go through multiple directors for Rogue One?
Oh, yeah. That was Gareth Edwards or Evans, possibly.
Yeah, the Godzilla guy, right?
The Godzilla guy who did Monsters before that.
Okay.
Yeah. The
Josh Trank did Chronicle. I'm trying to figure out which low budget guy did which movie.
Yeah, I forget what Josh Trank was. Josh Trank did Fantastic Four. And then that was not good.
He was supposed to do a Marvel movie though.
Yeah, and he was signed to do a Star Wars movie. To do a Star Wars movie, and when Fantastic Four did not do well. Actually, way before it didn't do well. Like there were stories from the set of Fantastic Four that got him fired from the Star Wars movie. Anyway, Chloe Zhao, go check out The Rider, and also check out The Eternals, I guess. I don't know.
I think I want to watch The Rider just so I can get a sense of her style again before seeing The Eternals to compare. Does anything carry over?
Honestly, I know I feign confidence on this podcast when I make recommendations sometimes, but I'm honestly confident you will like The Rider.
Okay.
For sure. If not love it, at minimum, you will be like, that was super interesting.
Perfect. All right. Looking forward to it. My number 3, and I think we're going to start getting into a lot of crossover territory. This is 2016's Hell or High Water.
My number 2 is 2016's Hell or High Water. So let's talk about it.
Let's do it. And now this is actually David Mackenzie, not Taylor Sheridan.
Did he write it, Tyler Sheridan?
Maybe.
Tyler or Taylor?
Taylor. It's I'm on Letterboxd, which is not always Taylor Sheridan wrote Hell or High Water.
Wrote it.
There you go. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'll do a quick setup. We can talk together. This is starring Chris Pine, who's playing, I believe, a divorced dad, and his brother, who's an ex-con, Ben Foster, and they are robbing small-town banks out west. But this is modern. This is modern out west. And then you've got Jeff Bridges, who's playing the local, I don't know, either sheriff or marshal lawman, who is tracking these bank robbers and trying to bring them to justice. And Jeff Bridges is playing a really interesting character. He's kind of playing like his take on, or I guess he did Rooster Cogburn already. It's sort of like a modern Rooster Cogburn, I guess.
Yeah.
In that sense, kind of old school, he's been around, looking a little long of the tooth, where you've got Chris Pine and Ben Foster, doing the younger ones, and they're a little bit more run and gun about it. And this movie, it's a Western. Like, it's got bank robbers. It's got, the good guys in white hats, the bad guys wearing black hats, and shootouts. It has everything that makes a Western a Western. Just takes place in 2016, and it's good. I think it even takes place around like events that were happening, maybe not 2016, maybe it was like 2008, but it was taking place like around actual American politics and things that were happening in the country at the time. Yeah,
I mean, it's a little bit about the financial meltdown and stuff.
The housing crisis.
Yeah, people being burned by that longer term type of thing. Yeah, it's good. I enjoy Hell or High Water quite a bit. I think there's a lot to like about it. All the performances are great. I especially love the Native American sidekick that Jeff Bridges has. It's pretty awesome. It doesn't have a whole lot of like play to the plot in general. He's mostly just kind of advising Jeff Bridges, but somehow they connect you to that character so that when things start happening, it just they do a really good job. Like, one of my favorite supporting characters, in that, like, he doesn't necessarily have to be in the movie, but he makes the movie better. He makes the other characters better. He specifically makes Jeff Bridges' character better.
Yeah.
And I just love the tone, and it's like a perfectly paced movie for me. There's enough downtime between big moments in the movie. They use that downtime efficiently to either build character or add things to the plot that raise the stakes. And then at the end, you just get this awesome, mano-a-mano gunfight that it's hard to tell where it's going to go without it being over the top for what reality is. And I really enjoy Hell or High Water.
All right. So that was my number 3. Your number 2.
My number 2.
I'm going to say my number 2, which might be your number 1.
Okay.
So if it is, I want you to take over because I want you to get a chance to talk about your number 1.
Okay.
My number 2 is 2007's No Country for Old Men.
My number 1 is 2007's No Country for Old Men.
Take it away, James.
All right. I mean, this is another movie that just, if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard us talk about this movie 10 times now. But Coen Brothers movie, awesome neo-Western about an assassin. He's trying to hunt down some guy. He's trying to hunt down some merchandise, I would say. And some people have got this merchandise, and so he's trying to track them down, but he is just absolutely merciless. And it's kind of set in the dusty West. Is it set in Arizona? Something like that. I don't remember.
Something
exactly
like that.
Where.
And is it set in maybe the 80s? It didn't feel like it was.
It's Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's set in the 80s, so it's not set like same day as 2007, but it's modern, I would say. It's just a really tense, intense movie with great performances all around. Kind of somewhat an all-star cast. Tommy Lee Jones, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Woody Harrelson, Kelly MacDonald, Stephen Root's in the movie.
Garrett Dillahunt. I love Garrett Dillahunt.
Yeah. It's definitely kind of a that guy movie. If you watch it, there's even like the, sub characters are all people you're going to recognize from other great things. And if you're into Coen Brothers movies, you've already seen this. But it's a good one.
Yeah, if anyone needs any convincing to see this movie, it's the performances. Javier Bardem is incredible as Anton Chigurh, the antagonist, who's just this lethal, emotionless killer. Josh Brolin, great as the protagonist. He's on the run with the merchandise, thinking he can outsmart the bad guys. And then you got Tommy Lee Jones, who's in the middle, he's the lawman trying to hunt them all down. And Tommy Lee Jones, he's the old man. He's the one. He's kind of playing the I'm too old for this stuff without actually saying it literally in the movie.
Yeah, and he's played that character in Westerns for a while now, like a good 2 decades. I think I've seen Westerns where Tommy Lee Jones shows up as that guy. But this is the best version of that.
Yeah. And like Cry Macho, this is the version of him looking back on his career and being like, well, here's everything I've done. And like, man, I'm getting kind of old for this whole game.
Yeah. And Josh Brolin, and he's done this multiple times. He does it in Sicario as well, is just kind of a good guide for a movie. Like he's also good in Hail Caesar as kind of the audience surrogate of sorts. I know that's not exactly his role in Sicario, but he's just a good base for a movie. He's never the flashiest person on screen, but he's the most dependable.
He does the same thing in Inherent Vice.
Yeah.
Like he just pops up whenever you need like a little push in the plot of Inherent Vice, because that's a meandering. I love it, but it's a meandering movie. Josh Brolin pops up and just kind of pushes that movie along.
Yeah. And Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men will almost ruin Javier Bardem for you, because you won't be able to watch him in anything else without remembering just how scary he is in No Country for Old Men. I mean, it's one of those performances, like a career defining performance, at least in my eyes, of the Javier Bardem movies I've seen since seeing No Country for Old Men. He just will always be the scary guy from No Country for Old Men. I don't think I could watch like a romance movie with him in it and buy it, because he flat murders people for no reason.
you can't watch Vicky Cristina Barcelona and be like, yeah, this guy seems lovable to me.
I mean, I guess I have seen it since then, but I just I can't think of another. If you ask me to like name Javier Bardem movies, this will always be number 1.
Have you seen him in Beautiful or Beautiful?
Yes, I've seen that movie. I don't remember much about what it's about.
I remember it's a real downer.
Oh, like, is it about like people being trafficked?
No, I think it's about death.
Yeah, and it has like moments where reality is twisted, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I think I have seen that.
Yep.
I remember that being good.
Oh, it's good, but it's
dark.
It's dark. Yeah. I remember it's being it's a movie where I watched before I had kids, and I think now that I have a child, it might be too much to handle. We'll see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kyle, what is your number one neo-Western?
It's been mentioned. You mentioned it. Can you take a guess?
Let me look at my list since it was mentioned. It's Logan.
It's Logan.
Yep.
You got it. It's Logan. Just like you, Logan surprised me. I feel the same way that everyone feels about X-Men Origins Wolverine, as well as the Wolverine, and it's bad and fine. And Logan, do you remember the trailer for Logan?
No, I don't watch trailers.
Oh, you have not seen the trailer for Logan?
I mean, maybe I have since then.
Okay.
But I didn't watch it before the movie came out.
After this podcast, go watch it. I think it's one of the best trailers.
All right.
If we ever do a favorite trailer episode, that's going to be up there. The whole
We've
thing
already
is set.
Done it, but maybe we'll do another one. That's the unreleased episode.
The missing episode.
Mm-hmm.
So the trailer's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's got Johnny Cash doing his cover of Hurt is sort of the main music, and it's sort of hitting on all these different Western themes. Even in the trailer, you know this movie is a Western where it's about the lone wolf, redemption, just trying to survive in a changing world. All the things that you expect to see in a Western is in Logan. It's not contemporary. It actually takes place in the future in the Marvel universe. That's fine. It's it's not taking place in the 1880s. But yeah, this movie is the best representation of the Wolverine Logan character because you're not seeing him at his prime. You are seeing old man Logan, where even though he's got healing ability to extend his life is still coming to an end. Like, just because he can heal and extend it, he's not going to be young forever. So you see like his body failing him. You see him trying to retire and just sort of live out the rest of his life and get sucked back into the superhero universe, a world that left him behind and that he left behind.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, you mentioned Patrick Stewart's in this, doing his probably last take on Professor X, and he is just as good as Hugh Jackman. Like, you watch Patrick Stewart in this movie, and Patrick Stewart could have phoned in Professor X. It's an established character. It's a Marvel movie. Like, he could have just shown up, read some lines in his bravado voice, and be done. But like, even in Logan, Patrick Stewart is going 100%. Like, he is doing the best he can. And I appreciate that about him as an actor. Like, I never see him not get 100% in the movie, no matter what role he takes. I'm sure there's examples where you feel like he's phoning it in, but this is a case where like he is playing that character to its fullest. And then Daphne Keane, who plays the child they find, like, where did that come from? Both the her as an actor and the character she's playing blew me away. This is just a movie that I was not expecting whatsoever, to get something so true to the character, so violent, and so exciting to watch. And Logan checked all those boxes for me. It's a movie I saw in the theater with a friend, and we looked at each other like, "Oh my god! Like, are we actually seeing this movie?" Like, we were amazed that this is the movie we got.
Sure.
So yeah, it's my number one. It's obviously you can't tell I love this movie. It's a top 50 movie for me. You're gonna hate this, James. It looks great in black and white.
I'm not sold on these, black and chrome.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever they call it for what's the term for Logan? There's a term for the version.
Noir. That's what they call it.
Version.
Noir. Yeah.
To me, it's just a gimmick, but yeah.
I mean, it is a gimmick, but it's a movie. We talk about this on Patreon, so I'm not going to rehash this whole conversation, but it's a movie where I think it works. Even if it's just a gimmick, it doesn't feel like an afterthought. It feels like they took the time to make this in black and white and still look good. They didn't just hit a button and say, okay, we're done.
Oh, so you think they actually went like scene by scene and like colored it or color corrected it so that when they did go black and white, it would like look good in black and white?
I think so. I don't have any evidence that's what they did.
Sure.
I haven't read anything, but it looks good enough. I mean, it looks great in black and white, where I would be surprised if someone just hit a filter button and shipped it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with modern black and white movies. Like Sin City is a movie that's majority black and white, but it works there because it's emulating the comic book, and like there's very specific choices in what's black and what's white. You know what I mean? It's like part of the style of the presentation. I don't really even have a problem with marketing gimmicks of black and white versions. That really doesn't even bother me. I'm just not going to watch them probably. There's a good chance if I'm going to rewatch something that I already like, I'm going to watch the full color version because that's what I watched that I liked. I don't know. Unless somebody tells me it makes it better, which I would argue how.
I mean, if you see Logan in the noir version, it's the exact same movie.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is it feels less violent because there's no red blood. It's just black and white.
Right.
So you have less of that blood. And there's just some really, because it's shot majority in the desert with like stark lighting and shadows, those shadows really pop. I would say maybe where the black and white fails is the ending where they're in the woods, and that's such much more modeled light, which doesn't look as good. So if you want to watch it in black and white, watch the first half when they're in the desert and you'll get the full experience. And if you don't want to see the rest of it, that's totally fine.
Sure. I need to rewatch it. I've only seen it once.
Really?
Yeah. I have it on 4K, so it's just sitting there waiting to be watched, like in the best presentation I can get. So one of these days I'm going to do it, but have not revisited it since the theater.
When my 4K came, I watched key scenes in 4K and it looked pretty awesome. So I think you're going to dig it. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's one of the discs that gets highly rated from a presentation perspective.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the, demo disc, but it's, as far as modern films goes, films filmed in the 4K era, they say it's like about as good as it gets, basically.
I keep hearing that the demo disc is Black Hawk Down.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is, you'd be surprised because it was filmed, 2002 probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they pulled it from like a 35 millimeter
print,
print type of thing. And if they had like a perfect print, maybe there's something about the visuals that just transfer well to 4K. That's interesting. I've heard Dracula is really good as well. Like the
Bram
Stoker's Dracula. Okay. Actually, I've heard older movies, if they can get a proper print, do pretty well. Like a demo disc I've heard of is 2001. Supposedly the 2001 disc is like amazing.
It is. I had one complaint with 2001 demo disc, and I think the contrast is cranked up too high, or the brightness.
Okay. Compared to the original.
Spoiler, everyone knows it's my favorite movie. So I did a ton of reading on this. And supposedly the 2001 4K is how the movie should look. Because, with the DVD and the Blu-ray, it gets color corrected every time. It's a little bit different. So for me, the Blu-ray version is the definitive version in my mind because it's the version I've seen the most. So watching the 4K was a little jarring because it just looked different than how I was expecting it to look. So I almost spent more time not picking apart, but really critiquing like, oh, this looks different than I remember. Mm-hmm. So I watch the movie once a year anyway. So the next time I watch it, I'll be able to like have a little bit different view on it. But I felt like there were some scenes that seemed washed out.
Because it was brighter.
Because it was brighter. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was the intention. Maybe like if I'd seen this in, 70 millimeter in 1968, that's what Kubrick wanted.
How did they know that that's closer to what was intended? Like, did they get the DP or the cinematographer from, 40, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, however long it's been now?
So they worked with Leon Vitali, who is, did you ever see Film Worker, the documentary?
I didn't, but I know what it is.
Okay, yeah. So Leon Vitali was basically Kubrick's right-hand man from, I think, Barry Lyndon on. So Leon Vitali was not there for 2001, but if there's anyone who knows the style and is close to Kubrick, that is the guy.
Interesting. That's like the closest to probably anybody that's alive that would know, I guess. Yep. Interesting. I've also heard the same about The Shining. I think you have that on 4K, right? Have you watched that?
That looked awesome in 4K.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't watched that one yet either.
Yeah, when I get a movie on 4K, I just have to watch it within the week because I'm so excited to see it. So
yeah. I tend to save them.
That's fair. Yeah.
I'm like, someday I'm going to rewatch this, and when I do, it's going to be this version of it, type of thing. But cool. Well, that was our top 10 neo westerns and Cry Macho, which made one of our lists.
By default.
By being one of 10, right?
Because we ain't make 10.
For sure. Thank you for listening to this episode 496 of the Cinereelists. We appreciate your listenership. Don't forget, you can always send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com, REEL with an S on the end. Follow us on YouTube. Support us on Patreon. Leave an Apple Podcast review. Send us an email. I already said that. And also follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Cinereelists. You could also follow me on my personal Twitter or Letterboxd account at YoJRB.
You can find me on Letterboxd at PeterSKB.
Nice. We will be back next week with something. We don't know what yet, but we'll it's going to be something. It's going to be big.
It's in the works.
It's gonna be really big.
Maybe the most consequential Cinereels episode ever?
Probably. Most likely.
I think it's a safe bet to say. Yep.
Most likely, for sure. So stay tuned for that. And until then, keep it Cinereel.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.